I joined in with the haven't you people ever heard of?
Closing the goddamn door, no.
It's much better to face these kinds of things with a sense of poison rationality. I joined in. Sorry.
Haven't you people ever heard of?
Closing the goddamn door.
No.
I went to see them live in like Nottingham, I remember, and I like literally almost had a panic attack at Panic at the Disco.
Did you panic at the disco?
Because I hate crowds, right? And they were fucking insane. Like I
hate people.
Kind of close to the front, and everyone kept on shoving each other left and right, and I was like so panicked. I was like, I have to get out of here. I'm panicking at Panic at the Disco right now.
I'm having an anxiety attack at the disco. I appreciate that's less catchy, but I need to get out of here.
Get me out. That happened to my friend when we went to see Dizzy Rascal. Same thing, we were at the front, and it was me, Maggie, and our friend Charlotte, and me and Maggie were like, yeah, this is the best thing ever. And Charlotte was like, oh my god, I hate this, get me out.
I cannot stand crowds like that.
It's getting shoved at the front as well.
I can remember the first time I went to one like that. I went with my stepdad and his friend, and they were always going to stuff like that. The first time I encountered a mosh, or like and everybody moving around where you're like really being pushed into and stuff, I was so not expecting it that I was like, I don't know, I think I was just like, right guys, we've got to stick together while we handle this. I think I was like holding their hands like, okay, we're gonna go this way, and they were just laughing at me because they were like, this is just normal for concerts, but it was brand new to me.
See, I don't mind like getting pushed around a bit, but like a full-on mosh, absolutely not, never. That's horrible. I can't see what people enjoy about them at all. Getting like hit, no thank you. Yeah, I chipped my tooth, guys. I chipped my veneer.
How on earth have you done that?
I walked into a gate last night.
How did you walk into a fucking gate?
God, do you know what? It was so unexpected. I was drunk.
I mean,
I can't remember what we were doing. Just like, I don't know, just being idiots. And I walked into this gate, went boom, and then I chipped my veneer. So,
mate,
that's where we're at. 3 days before I go to Mexico as well, so that's fun.
That's fun. Show me.
Right?
Show me.
So that tooth there,
yeah,
I chipped it.
Yeah.
Like a few years ago.
I remember.
Again, when I was drunk.
Yeah.
So I have a veneer over it, and then I walked into a gate last night. I chipped that.
Are you going to have to pay for that?
I'm a student, so I'm hoping not.
No.
I don't have a dentist though, so I need to sign up with a dentist.
Yes, and if you're signing up for an NHS one, you'll probably get one in 2027.
Yeah. To be fair, I've always found it easy to find dentists.
Oh, I haven't. But then
really?
We are out in I'm in a smaller town. I'm in a smaller town, and yeah, so that's probably why.
Yeah. Do we need to do a trigger warning about it? Because it's, suicide.
Well, we didn't trigger warn the rosebuds. How have you had flashbacks every time you've gone into your garden now, Corey?
I don't have any fucking rosebuds right now anyway, because my garden's being shit.
Did you go out after that pod and be like, I was gonna like when you go to a buffet and they like make the salami into a little rose and it's like a little meaty rosebud. I saw one of those not that long after, and I was going to send it to you, Corey, and then I was like, no, because it's number one, it's the rosebud would be offensive to you, which was the intended purpose. But then I was like, it's entirely made of meat, so that's probably a step too far.
A meaty rosebud.
Well, that's what it is, isn't it?
Horrible sentence.
Meaty rosebud.
Look at my meaty rosebud. I just feel sick.
Very good. So anyway,
but I think maybe we should do a bit of a trigger warning, because we're talking about, today we're talking about euthanasia, the ethics behind it, and euthanasia is this, and we're talking about other stuff as well, but euthanasia is assisted suicide, and it literally means good death.
Yeah.
So I'll be talking about that. And what's the case as well, Charlie?
So also I was going to look at it just briefly. Well, we meant to discuss this ages ago, and then obviously Naomi kept talking about, sex dreams and more important stuff like that. We talk about the case of Archie Battersbee, because I think there is overlap in terms of the law, because a lot of it comes down to when life is deemed to have ended. So I read the legal judgment on that several weeks ago so that we could discuss it. And then Naomi kept having wet dreams, and that obviously was the priority. So,
no, I'm dreaming about us.
That's true. But yeah, then that is true.
That is true.
It was just one nipple. Naomi, it was one nipple. I've seen worse when you've sent me drunk selfies.
I don't remember sending you drunk selfies.
Well, no.
Oh, no, I do actually, yeah. Quite recently.
I know, because I went through my phone the other day and I was like, there she is.
There she is.
There she is. Plus, like, the thing in Edinburgh, like, I've seen...
Went through your phone, you mean your screensaver?
Yeah, I went through my,
I opened my phone and there you were.
I went through the poster that I've put on the ceiling above my bed.
Yeah.
And there you were. Fanny out and everything. Yeah. So, yeah, okay. So, I sent you both podcasts. Did you both listen to it?
Yeah, I did, yeah.
Was it the most fascinating thing ever?
But
really interesting.
Yeah, it's
so
really
interesting. I listened to that maybe a couple of years ago, and then every like maybe 6 months I've probably gone back to it to like refresh, because I just think it's such an interesting. It's probably the best overview of where we're at with euthanasia, I think, to date. That's it. It's on the Guardian if anyone wants to check it out. Is it something like has death or assisted dying gone too far?
Yeah, I can put a link in the description.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Cool. So I don't know what I mean.
Do you want to start with explaining the Charlie Battersbee case and what happened there? Archie, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was looking at Charlie Gard, which was another really interesting case.
Similar. Today. Yeah, very similar, both. You know, I did part of my dissertation on the Charlie Gard
did you?
case. Yeah. Well, one of.
Oh, interesting.
One of my dissertations.
She's very educated, you know.
I'm very educated.
Edgy. And educated. Okay, yeah, start with talking about the Charlie case.
Which, it was
Archie.
Yeah, so Archie Battersbee. So, well, it was all over the media, wasn't it, a while back? And I thought, I'm going to look into this, because obviously I work in the law, and I thought, I wonder what area of law this is, because it's not your everyday case, and obviously I tend to do more your everyday type stuff. And I was thinking, does this fit into children law? And even like, you know, I spoke to a barrister I knew, and I was like, is this children law? And he was like, I'm not sure, it might be human rights law. So if even a clever barrister wasn't sure, I thought, all right, okay. But actually, if you just Google Archie Battersbee judgment, it's really easy to find it. It's about 30 page document you can read through, and it's in very simple language. And it was just the simple legal mechanism was an application for what's called a specific issue order. So I come across those in legal matters, for example, when parents disagree about something and they want one of them, let's say vaccinations or a child going abroad or change of name, loads of different things, what school a child goes to. You can ask the court to make an order on a specific issue that you don't agree on. So
it'd be like an objective, is that the word? A third party, an objective third party.
Well, the court, a judge will make the decision, or magistrates if it's heard by magistrates. Obviously, his case was heard by a High Court judge. And it was appealed several. It was appealed and the appeals lost. But I read, I think, the initial judgment, and because it's that long ago now, I've forgot the judge's name, but it was a woman. I thought the judgment was very good, and you know, while we were talking before about how sometimes things can be really difficult to read and very wordy, it wasn't at all. Like, it was really, like, I would recommend reading it. So basically, it was all. I mean, what's your guys? What are your recollections about what you saw in the media about it?
Well, I was going to say, like, tell the people, for people who aren't in the UK, like, what the actual case was, like, what happened to this boy. I feel like you two were more familiar with it than I was, because you were discussing it quite a lot on the WhatsApp group. Yeah.
Do you want to go, or should I?
Well, all I know is that his mum said that he was trying a TikTok challenge that went wrong. And it was like the blackout challenge. And he was found with like a sort of ligature around his neck at home.
Yeah.
And
had he used a dressing gown cord or something like that? And
dressing gown,
basically.
Dressing gown, belt.
And also, what is the blackout challenge?
I think it was to get yourself to hang yourself until you black out and then
to pass out. But it's not necessarily, you don't have to hang yourself. That's the other thing. Like you can do it anyhow. Like a lot of people just like hold their breath until they pass out, and then obviously like your system kicks back in when you do it that way.
Yeah, well, but
if you do it with a ligature around your neck, obviously like
your system can't kick back in. Yeah, I don't know. I've not read anything about that, but I mean, the thing that was the thing that was of interest to me was the fact that he then was. So I mean, the thing that caught the media attention anyway. There's lots of peripheral discussions going around, but the main thing was that he was taken to hospital, and then rushed off to another more serious hospital, at which point they thought he was brainstem dead. And they wanted to do a brainstem death test to try and prove that. And they then wanted to, and I think the initial application was that they could do that test, and whether or not he could be. Well, I think the two things that the judge, again, sorry, this is so long since I've read this now. The two things that the judge had to decide on was he dead? Was he dead? Because the legal test for that in this country is brain stem death. And the legal test in America is brain death.
Okay.
And I mean, I don't know about the rest of the world, but so I thought that was interesting. What, is he actually dead? And number two, could they turn off his life support? So that was the key thing. Mum didn't want them. Family didn't want the hospital to turn off his life support, and the hospital made an application for the specific issue of whether they could.
Even though in the UK he was technically dead.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's interesting, isn't it? So he was technically dead.
So they did that brainstem death test.
They couldn't
do it.
But they got a judge to decide on the balance of probability, is he dead? And the judge thought, yeah, on the balance, he is dead.
Okay.
So because one of the things they did was they made the initial application, then everything was delayed and blah, blah, blah. And then they did MRIs and they kept doing scans and stuff and going back and forth. And they noticed that a part of his brain had even started necrotizing and like coming away. So like, I mean, the medical view was that there was no coming back.
What does necrotizing mean?
Dead flesh.
Right. Actually like decomposing.
Rotting. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Because of I mean, I'm no expert, but because of what happened, they couldn't actually do the brainstem test. But the judge, it was clear that he was dead. There was, I mean, the main consideration in any legal children matter is what is in the child's best interest. And one of the things the mum was arguing was his wishes and feelings would need to be taken into account. So she said his brother was clear that if he was ever in a situation like that, he would want to be put to sleep, or for it to be not put to sleep, but he'd want the medical intervention withdrawn. But he said Archie had more recently developed or religious tendencies, or had some sort of belief, and his wishes and feelings would be that he was kept on life support until essentially his body gave up. I think I don't know, but the other thing in the judgment was that they got their counsel, so their barrister, who was doing it pro bono, to raise that they thought the hospital was starving him.
I read about that.
Yeah, but
why?
But because whatever damage had been done in his brain was so bad that he could no longer control his bowels. So he was basically just having awful bouts of diarrhea over and over again. They'd even had to get a nutritionist on board to try and work out, what they were giving him to try and mediate it with what they were feeding him. But one of the medical ways of trying to help that is if somebody's had an awful bout of diarrhea, then you have a break. You don't feed them, you let them heal before you introduce more food again. So the judge was saying that the judge found there was absolutely no evidence of that. But if you see
them
pictures of him,
starving him intentionally.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
That's what they were alleged. That's what the parents were alleging the hospital was doing. Yeah, starving it intentionally. Yeah. It was very thin. But I mean, if you've gone past a point where bits of your brain are coming off because it's dead, and your brain no longer can stop you from just shitting yourself every time you eat anything.
But she'd started up like a Facebook group, hadn't she? Like his mum.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, there was loads of it. And what was it? A Christian group had got on board and was saying...
Yeah. And they were basically they were all basically rallying around her. Like, he had his own little fan club. I can't remember what it was called. And...
A fan club?
Like, Archie did.
Archie's Angels, was it?
I think it was Archie's Angels.
Yeah.
And it was basically like... It had become like a bit of a cult, hadn't it? This is what I was reading about, like the sort of like internet cult side of it, which I found interesting.
Yeah.
And like she was basically running this group, and she was making a lot of allegations against the hospital in this group, and they were all like agreeing with her and being like, it's terrible that they won't feed him. And like they would just have like conspiracy theories just like run rampant in this group about like the hospital. Like it even got to the point where some of them were saying, oh, I think they want his organs. Like, and
it's like, happens as soon as anything goes into the media, doesn't it? People who have no real understanding of what's going on all of a sudden are very opinionated about a situation of which they know so little about.
Yeah. So, one of the things that I was really interested in was because they kept showing clips, the people who were trying to argue that they should keep the life support on, kept showing clips of somebody who had allegedly been declared brainstem dead, who'd come back from that. I mean, I suspect this was probably just a case where they'd got it wrong in the past. And there was a guy who had apparently been declared brainstem dead, and then he was interviewed, and you could see that he had you could see he had a brain injury from the way he was speaking. But I suspect
is this what they showed the judge in court? Oh, what?
Not in the well, I'll get to that. So that's what piqued my interest. I was thinking, okay, how interesting. Does our UK and a similar American test for death? So I mean, you can be lying there, you can be breathing. I mean, I think if you're brainstem dead, then you have to be assisted with that. So you have to have be assisted by the hospital, or whatever machinery to do it. I don't think you can do it for yourself once you're brainstem dead, but you can have a heartbeat and you can be breathing, and the machinery will just keep you going. So you can be dead legally but have a heartbeat and be breathing. I mean, that is but anyway,
so you know the guy that came back after he was declared brainstem dead,
never find it. I could never find his specific case.
Okay.
But I suspect, because there's a difference between being told that somebody's going to be a vegetable and being told that somebody's going to be brainstem dead. I mean, there's different levels of it. Because I could remember a Louis Theroux documentary, and I tried to look for this as well, and I couldn't find it, where he was in America, and there was somebody where their family members had been told he is never going to come back as anything like himself, and then he did, and it was a miracle. But that is different, I believe, to brainstem death, where you're gone. Your brain can no longer function.
Because even like people who are in comas for a long time, you get people who are in comas for years and then they come back. But from what I can gather, when that does happen, that person is just so incredibly unwell that in my opinion it would have been better to just let them die.
Well, I mean, sometimes, but I mean, I think that's a separate issue. I think brainstem death is different to being in a coma. I mean, I'm not saying they're mutually exclusive. I think you can have overlap, but I think brainstem death is the absolute, the last bastion. So that's what I think it was. So I think that's what really piqued my interest, and I thought, okay, how I want to know, because if I was a parent, that was the thing that made me question whether I would take the parent's side, because I'm thinking, if I was a parent and there was even these miracle cases, I would be going and trying to plead that case. And what one of the experts that they got to plead in the case to the court, Dr. Schumann, I think it was. So I think he is an expert who questions whether brainstem death is really death, whether that should really be the legal test for death. And so I was listening to that, and I was going through some of his work, and I was trying to find a case that could change my mind, and I never could. I mean, there were cases where in America there was a case where I think the parents won and they got to take the daughter home, and then so she then ended up having two. She was declared brainstem dead and then died of kidney failure, so she died twice. But the reality is she never woke up. She was never hurt. They kept her physical body going. So that's what I found really interesting about it. I never but I didn't find any convincing cases when I looked. Nothing that would make me think, you know. And the reading around it, like reading the case, maybe earlier on the parents had an argument, but as the further you got along and they did scans and compared, and you could see that, you know, I mean, if your brain is necrotizing, then it's done, isn't it?
Is there like brain scans in the legal document then?
Oh yeah, and they had the experts testify as well, and
you could see it just like
I couldn't see it. No, I didn't. It's not in the judgment. The judgment is literally just a written version of so at the end of a case, once the judge has viewed everything, they write. They refer to all the evidence they've seen, what they deduce from that evidence, and what their judgment is. So, but I think that is one of the things that really stuck out to me, was that, you know, they because there were so many appeals and so much delay, they were doing scans all the way through. And it wasn't getting any better.
I've just Googled brainstem death as well.
Yeah.
And it's when the brainstem, a part of the brain, dies, and the person would never be able to breathe or be conscious again. They wouldn't be able to breathe without a ventilator.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't ever gain consciousness.
Yeah.
So they must have been trying to argue that he wasn't brainstem dead.
I think the parents didn't want him to have the test at all.
Why?
So I've just rechecked it. So there was two initial applications. One was a specific issue order application. They wanted an order to say that the hospital wanted an order to say that they could complete the brainstem testing. They also wanted an order that they could withdraw mechanical ventilation. And in the end, the damage, I think his brain was so damaged they couldn't do a brainstem test anyway. But the judge did order that based on all of the evidence, he was dead. And they declared him dead in March, even though...
So they wanted to try withdrawing the ventilator?
Who wanted to try withdrawing the ventilator?
Is that what you said? They were arguing, they were saying that he would be able to survive without a ventilator?
No, the hospital wanted to withdraw treatment because it was a lost cause.
Right, okay, yeah.
And the family were fighting to keep him on the ventilator, to say, let him die while he's on the ventilator. This is what I don't get about the whole Christian argument. Surely, if what you want is God's will, you shouldn't whack anyone on a ventilator anyway.
No, God's will
Can't have your cake and eat it too.
Died that day if it was God's will. Yeah.
So just ridiculous. So yeah. Anyway, I thought it was interesting. that they're all about all the conspiracies that were being, you know, the conspirational stuff and the starving him. And I'm sure there was something else as well. I can't remember what it was, but there was something else that they were trying to claim that I think the judge shot down pretty quickly as well.
There was absolutely no evidence of foul play.
No.
But it is interesting. I wonder why they were claiming all that then.
I think they were egged on by their group as well.
Grief.
Like,
possibly. Yeah.
Because they were like a religious sect, like that Facebook group. It was like Archie was like Jesus who died for like a few days and they were waiting for him to come back to life. It was like that was their purpose in life, and it like gave a load of people a purpose to like bring Archie back to life, despite all of these evil doctors and judges saying that he was dead. It was like they were trying to control this thing.
So were they part of this religion that he joined? Because his mum was saying that he'd become quite religious recently.
I think that probably, I think they were using every possible legal argument that they could.
Yeah.
And a child's wishes and feelings in a children matter is something that must be taken into account. But the key consideration is always going to be the child's welfare, which there is some overlap with their wishes and feelings, but just because a child says they want something doesn't mean that's what's good for them. And so overall, the judge felt that it was not... Well, for one, the judge felt that Archie died in March 2022. And for another, even if he hadn't, the judge was very clear that it would not have been in his best interest to continue mechanical intervention and treatment.
I think it's quite interesting to think about cases like this one and the Charlie Gard one.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know much about the Charlie Gard one. Can you explain it?
He had...
he was a younger little boy, wasn't he?
He was a little baby, yeah. And he had this illness that typically would make you die within, I think, the first few days, maybe, but he lived longer. Anyway, there was... he was in Great Ormond Street Hospital, and there was a doctor... He was really ill, and there was this doctor in America who said, okay, well, I've got this experimental... treatment that I could give him. And so his parents wanted to fly him over to America to get this treatment. Now, Great Ormond Street Hospital said that wasn't in his best interests. And this
to
case
put him
really
on a plane and everything when he's in that.
Yeah.
This I'm sure they would have had to put loads of equipment on the plane and
but the NHS does do that sometimes. If there's like a treatment that, you know, it's been tested and it probably could help, then they do send people to other countries sometimes. But what they found was with this doctor, they found he had tested this out, but it had been tested out on rats who didn't have, like, it was affecting Charlie's brain and his muscles. And I think the rats that had been tested on, it had affected one or the other, I think. So it was more serious in him, and obviously he was a human. And so it went to court and it got quite high up, like human rights got involved, European human rights got involved. Anyway, in the end, they said that it wasn't in his, like you were saying, Charlie, by it being in the child's best interest, and they said it wasn't in the child's best interest. And so after like a really public battle, with people like Donald Trump tweeting about it, I think the Pope did as well. Because people were like, got really involved with this and had said that he should be able to go to America. And the American media were talking about it as well.
I think I read that judgment as well.
Yeah, it was such an interesting case.
Would it have caused him like unnecessary pain to go to America? Like what would be the reason that it's not in his best interests?
That it wouldn't work and it would cause him more suffering and pain?
Yeah, there wasn't any guarantee that it would help.
No, I think it was pretty certain that it wouldn't help. I think it was, if there'd been even a good chance that it would help, they would have done it, I think.
I don't think they were certain that it wouldn't help. I think the issue was that it hadn't been tested on humans. It wasn't that it was uncertain.
I could be wrong, but my memory of it is that they were initially looking at doing the trial treatment, but by the time it was even an option, he deteriorated so much that it wouldn't have worked anyway. That's my recollection of it. But the parents still wanted to try. And I think that
I don't think that Great Ormond Street Hospital, I don't think they were ever behind it. I think once they'd looked into it and saw the research that he'd done, I think they were like, this isn't gonna help him. This isn't in his best interest, which is why it then went to court, because the parents disagreed. I find it really interesting personally. I remember when I first read about it, because I thought, well, surely it should be, like, ethically speaking, it should be about what the parents think is right. I didn't agree that they should be overridden.
Do you know, I can remember, because I did this sort of like, you know, parents' rights versus children's rights, and I looked at a lot of these medical cases, because I think there was ones where parents had children that then needed something donated, and so they had another child just so that child could donate to the first child. Yeah.
Good God.
So
Really?
You say that, but I might do it. If my first child was going to die, I can see why these parents go mental. If you've got, or they start acting in bizarre ways. If you've got a child and they're going to die, you would do absolutely anything in your power to save that child. I'm sure the court condoned it as well.
Well, like, yeah, but you do anything, but you wouldn't want to harm another child. That doesn't make sense.
Well, we're not going to kill the other child, obviously, but it was, whatever. Like,
I wouldn't have another child so I could harvest its organs. That's wild.
But people donate kidneys and people die. It could have been anything. It could have been bone marrow. I can't remember. I would.
Would you?
Yeah, if Violet was going to die.
It doesn't help. It doesn't hurt someone to like do bone marrow, does it?
Well, it's probably not a particularly pleasant procedure. But by the time they're old enough to know it's happened. But yeah, it's an interesting area of law where you're looking at because it's not really what the child wants, is it? It's what the state thinks the child wants, because the person making the decision is not the child.
Yeah, so the parents, are surely then supposed to be the one whose opinion is taken into consideration if that child doesn't have autonomy.
But like, you've got parents who are anti-vaxxers. So let's look at this example in children law, which is interesting because that would be a specific issue order. If you've got two parents who agree to the child not being vaccinated, then the child will not be vaccinated and the state won't intervene. But if you've got one parent applying for a specific issue order because one parent is an anti-vaxxer and one parent wants a vaccine, generally the state will order the vaccine, because once there's a disagreement and the court need to step in, they'll make a decision in the best interests of the child, an informed decision based on, medical expertise and advice and guidance.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It brings, we were talking about Foucault like a few weeks ago and his theory of biopolitics and to what extent the court or the government gets to tell you what you can and can't do with your body. I don't know.
It's very interesting. There's a good book and a film called The Children Act. I'm pretty sure it's called The Children Act. Let me check that. I can't check it because the Children Act will come up. But it's about a boy who I think was maybe 17, who his parents were Jehovah's Witness, perhaps.
Oh, so yeah, they don't have blood transfusions or
so anything. They wouldn't agree to him having a blood transfusion. And he said he didn't want to have the blood transfusion. He wanted to die, or he wanted to just let, God choose, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, so the story, so the book and the film is all about that. And obviously, in this case, before he was 17, the judge intervened and ordered the transfusion because...
Really?
Yeah. You're not going to let a child die. But then in the, spoiler alert, in the book film, you then go on to whatever the problem was recurs after he's 18 and he makes the decision and he dies. But after, it's definitely worth going to see that and having a listen and having a watch of it. I love this sort of shit that makes you really, really think. So, yeah.
So is this is not based on a true story?
No.
Okay. I wonder...
But there are cases like that.
Yeah, because like I was saying, Jehovah's Witnesses, they don't have blood transfusions and so on. So if you have a child that needs a blood transfusion, but your parents are Jehovah's Witnesses, what happens in that situation? Does the medical
state will step in?
Do they?
And ask for a specific issue order, and then the court will make a judgment in the child's best interest.
Right. Okay.
Up until they're,
God, I don't actually fully know how I feel about that.
Yeah.
On one hand, I think, well, yeah, you can't just be letting kids die because of your religious beliefs. But then also I'm like, is it okay for someone else to tell you that your religious beliefs are not okay and that you're wrong and we as a state know better?
I mean, it's clear cut for me, personally.
Yeah.
If a child is going to die, then, and that child doesn't have the legal autonomy to make a decision, then the state makes a decision, and the state should not be bound by religion or whatever. That's my view. But I mean, I've got cases of female genital mutilation that I deal with. Are you would you defend that, Naomi?
What, FGM?
Yeah, parents' right to perform FGM.
No.
So they can let them die, but not FGM. You're not sure about the dying, but the FGM's a dead cert. It's tricky, mate. It's tricky.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Why do people do FGM?
Religious
honour,
beliefs.
culture. Yeah. It makes it. If you don't have it,
what it comes down to is controlling women, but they say religion.
Yeah, there's no logical reason for it. There's different types.
I don't think. I guess no, you do have a good point. I don't think I've ever thought that FGM was done for religious reasons, and it was just it was cultural, religious. They're all the same. Yeah. No, you're right. Yeah,
harm is. It's harmful.
But that's the thing. Okay, maybe that's where I'm confused. Maybe that's where I'm confused, or what's making me question it, because I feel like that's I think to perform FGM is actively harmful on an otherwise healthy female, whereas if a child is ill, and you say, okay, well then we're going to let the child die rather than doing something to stop it dying. I don't think I view that in the same way.
I can see the difference. One is action, one is inaction. But I mean, when that action is so commonplace in our society, one simple blood transfusion could keep you alive and back to your full normal self.
Yeah.
No.
So a blood transfusion was against religious beliefs of someone?
For Jehovah's Witnesses it is, yeah.
What? Why? What belief is that? Where does it say that in the Bible?
I don't know.
People have mad beliefs.
Yeah.
I don't know the roots of it, but yeah, they don't believe in blood transfusions.
See, I thought that I guess I just thought that the Archie case, and cases like that, they all sort of link into the law on how much we can intervene. So I just think it's interesting because obviously in that case, the parents couldn't decide, and the parents weren't allowed to keep trying. Once the state has decided that the legal test is met and you're dead, that's it. And yet, we can't choose to die in this country. You know, we can't say, this is absolutely awful, my life is hell. It's not going to get better. I want to die in a...
Well, they've actually changed the law, kind of, around euthanasia in this country.
Have they?
So, kind of, or they've changed the technicalities of it. So basically, in 1961, they brought out the Suicide Act, I think it's called, and it said that no one was allowed to, families couldn't assist someone with killing themselves.
Yeah.
Because if they did, then they would be prosecuted after the person had died. Now, people saw that ruling as very ableist, because what it essentially meant was that if you were very ill, but you were in a state where you were able to kill yourself, then you were perfectly within your rights to do that. However, if you had something degenerative, or you were paralyzed, or you couldn't kill yourself, then you didn't have that same right. And the only way for it to happen for you if you were disabled would be for family to help you. And so they said that was a very ableist law. And there was a case that happened with a woman called Debbie Kirby, I can't remember what her surname is, and she brought her case to the court, and she was very poorly, and she said that law made her want to kill herself earlier than maybe necessary, because she said
to the point where she couldn't anymore.
Yeah, because then what would happen is her husband would help her, and then he would get prosecuted after she died.
Yeah.
Now the court actually agreed with that.
Yeah.
And so now they have a clear set of rules or whatever that tells you if you would be prosecuted and if you wouldn't be prosecuted for helping someone die. So for instance, if there's no financial gain, if you've done everything that you could, blah 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 blah, these things that you can prove, then you can help someone die in this country and you won't be prosecuted for it. But say if there is financial gain, maybe you've helped other people kill themselves or some other dark stuff, then you will be prosecuted. So there's a little bit more leeway than there used to be now.
And that's that was in the 60s that was changed, is it?
No, the law came out in 1961, the Suicide Act.
Which allowed people to commit suicide if they wanted, yeah.
No, it said they couldn't. And then it was changed after this case with Debbie. I can't remember what her surname. Which was more... Purdy, is that what it is? We just Googled it. What year was that?
Suicide's been legal for about 40 years.
She died in 2014.
Yeah. So, yeah. So it's still illegal. Like, it's all illegal in this country. But you can assist someone now.
You've got to remember, though, that... Well, but I mean, I suppose euthanasia, though, is medical professionals and doctors being able to assist.
That's fair. So that's really illegal. So say now as a family member, you can assist someone with dying. You know, there's like all these rules that you have to meet certain criteria. However, if you are in the medical industry, then you still cannot assist someone in dying.
Yeah.
It's just not allowed.
I mean, the other thing to remember is that just because something is the law, doesn't mean that the state will necessarily prosecute it. So if a case comes along, so I think there was one, I can't remember, it was a few years ago, where this guy was so worried about the emotional, or whatever, not emotional, but like suffering his mum was going through. She was near end, like very much end of life. And he picked her up and threw her off a balcony. Yeah.
Good God, that was the way he chose to end her life?
Pardon?
That was the way he chose to end his mum's life? Surely.
Is that the way she chose?
Ways.
Is that how she wanted to?
I honestly don't know. I can't remember, but I do remember reading that the state chose not to prosecute after a thorough...
I would not choose to die like
I think
that.
Yeah, but I know. But I mean, I might not have sold it particularly well. I mean, that is what he did, but...
There's not a better way to sell that, mate.
What was his name?
That's what it is.
We'd have to look it up, but I think... I can't remember whether...
Son throws mum off balcony.
Yeah.
That's what she wanted. Fucking hell. Wow.
Oh, the care home balcony.
Care home balcony, yeah.
God.
She was in a care home, yeah.
He got a suspended term.
So they did... All right, so the CPS did pursue it then, and then the jury decided. Yeah. I don't know. But I mean, the thing is, I don't know if him having that would mean that he then wouldn't get his inheritance. I think whoever made the decision were very clear that he didn't do it maliciously. He did it because he wanted to stop suffering.
Yeah, I wonder when that happened then. That must have happened before the Debbie thingamajiggy case.
I think it was quite recent.
No, it was 2019.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So... how could you...
Oh, yeah, that's why he didn't go to prison. Yeah, okay.
How could he have proved that she really wanted that, though?
I don't know.
Maybe
I don't know that you
witnesses.
could prove that she necessarily wanted it. I mean, and certainly not at that point if she was in a state whereby she wasn't compass mentis enough to say what she wanted. But I think it was... What came across was that it wasn't malicious and that it was done out of desperation to stop her from suffering anymore.
Do you think it's really interesting that you can help someone die as a family member in this country, like essentially, kind of, it's kind of great, but you can. But if you are a doctor and you happen to have a family member who's very ill, then in that case you still can't.
I didn't know that. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Would you still be would you still be deemed to be a medical professional though? Because you can't be a doctor for a family member. It's conflict. You wouldn't be that person's medical professional. Don't know. I mean, if you were a doctor, you probably wouldn't want to risk that territory anyway.
Yeah. Wow. There was this really interesting case with this guy who had a woman who'd been in his care for a while, and she was really, really, really poorly. And she asked, both her and her son or son or two sons, asked him to help her die. And he did. He injected her. And he went to court for it, and they were going to charge him with murder, but he ended up being charged with manslaughter, and again had a suspended sentence.
Yeah.
So he didn't go to jail, and he still practices now as well.
Yeah.
And they were saying they weren't actually. I think the reason he didn't get charged with murder, I mean, he injected her with something that is the only purpose of that thing was to stop a heart. That's the only thing that you would use it for.
Yeah.
But I think he didn't get charged with murder because they said if they couldn't guarantee that it was that killed her because she was so poorly.
Yeah.
Which I found very interesting.
Oh yeah.
The fact that he's still allowed to practice as well. I thought, okay.
Yeah.
Not that I think he shouldn't be.
No.
But yeah, it's a real grey area in this country.
Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting. If you can't establish causation, you can have somebody did something and then this happened. But if you can't prove strongly enough that this was most definitely the cause of this, then yeah, you can't get your conviction. It's interesting.
I mean, what do you think of like laws surrounding euthanasia in this country?
I think euthanasia should be legal.
Where do you think the line should be drawn? So say like you can go to Switzerland now and you can, if you are like very poorly, you can have it, but say if it's but it has to be a physical illness. If it's depression, then you can't have it.
Yeah. Well, should we talk about like some of those cases, those interesting cases that were discussed? Do you remember
in
them?
the Netherlands?
Yeah.
Yeah, because you can, if you're depressed in the Netherlands, I believe you can.
I think it was Holland. There's
you can?
ID. Yeah, you can.
Is that what it said in the podcast?
Yeah.
Okay.
Somebody wasn't listening.
No, I thought what would happen is there was a woman who had a patient that was depressed and then she'd gone on holiday because she didn't want to give the person euthanasia, and then she'd gone on holiday, come back, and her colleague had done it. Oh yeah, so yeah, obviously
that's one
it's
example,
legal.
That wasn't depression, that was dementia.
Okay.
So the interesting cases then, so the one that seems to be most commonly known is the case of Ariella. She's a 29-year-old woman from, I think, Holland, who had struggled with mental health her entire life, to a degree that medical professionals had agreed that she just wasn't going to get any better. Or they were like giving the examples of people who had gone to such dark places mentally, had no more treatment options, and then they'd get a bit better, and while they had capacity and they'd got a bit better, they'd say, I cannot go through that again. And they would know that they would go through it again, and they would say, I want to end my life. So the law there has opened up to allow that. I think the legal test is now around suffering to such a great degree that you're never going to come back from it, and they've allowed cases of very significant mental health problems to fall into that category, which is interesting. Because there was a case of there was a guy as well, I can't remember what his name was, Kilburn or something. Anyway, he was a young guy as well who opted for that. And one of the things that his family were saying afterwards was that or that I think there was two families. There was one where the woman had just gone off to work one day, they didn't know anything was wrong, and she'd killed herself. And then there was this other one where this guy who he'd got assisted suicide, and the family of the woman was saying to the family of him, we wish we could have had what you had, which was the opportunity for him to tell us everything that was in his head, to be able to say goodbye, to know what was going on, rather than to have a lifetime of asking questions. And I think that's what that Ariella woman was saying, was that she doesn't want to commit suicide because at the very least somebody's got to find her body. And she wanted to do it, she did it it was like assisted, like by a medical professional. They didn't administer it, they gave her the poison and she drank it. So yeah, but that's interesting. And then obviously they had the discussion, I think it's quite a hot topic, as to you've got medical professionals that are saying, she could have found a treatment in the future that worked for her. She could have got to a point. It's not the same as being terminally ill with cancer or something where you are never coming back.
Yeah, that's what I think. I think the line should be drawn at depression.
When it's like a mental thing, like depression. It's like,
I don't think
it's always
but then if you're a psychiatrist and you know that somebody is so bleak that ultimately it's never ever gonna, I mean, I get it. It's a really murky line and such a difficult one to draw. But if you are a psychiatrist and you do know that you've got a patient, I mean, because there was a psychiatrist interviewed on it who said that's the nature of the territory. There are always going to be those cases, but that doesn't mean that it is not our job to intervene and to assist people in dying, because there's always going to be those cases where you could get better.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I think it should be drawn there.
I don't know. I honestly don't know. I think there's arguments either way.
I think the line's, for me, I feel like it feels clear in that with a terminal illness, that's what it is. It's terminal. It's going to kill you. With some depressed people, maybe you won't come back and live like a life worth living. But then with a lot of depressed people, you can do. So I think that's why it should be drawn at depression. Yeah,
but I mean, I know that the psychiatrist, but I just don't think that's a line or anything that I could really comment on.
For euthanasia, for like assisting with someone's death, surely.
Yeah.
Clear line.
There were psychiatrists who were absolute experts who'd been doing it for years, who said, you'll always try and look for treatment options for somebody, but if you've run out of treatment options, you know that they're suffering horribly. They're never going to get any better.
Yeah.
And I guess I get that is a murkier line than somebody who's terminally ill with cancer. But even so, and I would hesitate to bring that in as a law in the way that they have in Holland. I would be like, definitely for terminally ill, physical, cancer, blah, 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 all of those. Yes, 100%. And I would hesitate with the other one, but I certainly wouldn't just dismiss it out of hand.
I think that I would, because I think that otherwise I think it's a really difficult line to draw, but I think it does need to be drawn somewhere. And I think depression is where I would draw the line.
Is it always
just
curable,
because you
though?
Can come back from it?
Is it always curable though? Like in every
case?
No,
not always. No, not always.
I think some people just can't come back from it, I think.
Yeah.
Which is why they kill themselves and then they jump in front of, and then the families are left. This is why this podcast was so good, because it considered all of these different angles. So it looked at a case with a woman where she said, she was ready to have assisted suicide and then she did get better. But for every one of her, there's going to be the people that don't, and who, like you say, who should get to make that decision. And this Ariella woman was saying that she was sure. She was absolutely sure. She made that decision. And she got to do it, in a way where she wasn't jumping in front of a train, or she wasn't leaving family members with questions. Everybody knew where they stood.
Yeah. So like one of the arguments against it in this country anyway is is it palliative? What's it called? End of life care? Palliative. If palliative care, like palliative care,
now. Palliative?
Is it palliative? Palliative. If it is good enough, then it should make palliative care. Then it should make someone's, like, the end of someone's life as comfortable as possible, and so it shouldn't be necessary.
Because I do think anyway, when they've got people who are very old and it's end of life care, I think the painkillers that they're being given can often play a part in speeding up the end anyway. So that's a blurry line in and of itself. They
were saying, it was this video that I'd watched, and they were saying as well, with a lot of people who've been interviewed in palliative care, like they said that when they first, like if you asked them months ago, they would have said, I want to die. And then because they have good care and they still get to see their families, etc., then that changes the way that they think. So that's one of the arguments against it in this country.
Yeah, because they were saying, because that's another thing that was discussed in this podcast. They were talking about how there are plenty of people who would say that they absolutely wouldn't want to live if this were to happen. But then when it happens, they adapt to things that they never thought they could possibly adapt to before. You just don't know how you're going to feel. So for me, the two cases in that podcast that I found really, I guess, shocking, and I guess was that there's a, I think it was in Switzerland, they said there was a prosecution because there was a woman with dementia who had said, when I lose my capacity and I lose my ability to, say, go to the toilet myself, etc., I don't want to live. So, lady with capacity instructs her medical professional, at this point, I want you to end my life. And all of the family were aware of that, etc. So then she loses her capacity, and the family get the doctor round to come and do it, and she resists. So they have to so the doctor forcibly does it.
Because she'd got to a point of dementia where there was like a split personality, like one personality wanted to die and the other one didn't. Well, and she kept on flipping back and forth, didn't she?
The one that had the capacity, so the one that was, had enough of cogs left,
cognitive
functioning, whatever, to instruct her medical professional.
Had enough cogs left.
Enough cogs left. She's got enough cogging around.
That's a scientific term. Bit of cogs still turning.
Yeah. So the one that had the woman before she lost her capacity was very clear. So whoever she was at that point wanted that to happen. But then once that capacity had gone, and she was, I don't know the details of it, but they're clear that this doctor is being prosecuted because once she didn't have a capacity anymore and she resisted, they just did it anyway because they were acting on the instructions from when they had capacity.
And they literally had to like hold her down, didn't they?
To kill her.
They had to pin her down while they like injected the poison. Like the most grim image you can think of.
That would
have been traumatizing for that doctor as well.
That makes me
it was the family. Same. It was the family that was holding her down. Like, it's traumatizing for them as well.
It's probably difficult, isn't it? Because you like, because for example, my mum is like, never let me get to that point. Get the insulin out. If it gets to that point, get rid. I don't want to live like that. I don't know why she's Yorkshire, because she's never been Yorkshire.
I was about to say.
But she is in this example, all right.
Isn't that so that was the case where the doctor lost, didn't he? And they said that they couldn't prove that she'd given her wishes.
I don't know, because probably that case is finished now, but this podcast was a couple of years ago and I never actually checked what happened with the case, because at the time of the podcast they were being prosecuted.
I believe that doctor lost that. I'm going to make sure of that.
Rightly so. I agree. I think. But then it's just difficult, isn't it? And I guess that's what you're saying, Naomi, is that it's very difficult when it's a mental problem. But I suppose it was a physical problem as well. But I suppose that's a different issue in and of itself, isn't it? Because it's that person's identity. Ultimately, the person with capacity had already gone. And whatever was left. Writing. I think that to me is a very clear cut no.
Yeah, 100%. People change their minds.
Very,
she's
interesting.
Ill,
because a lot of people, when they're like slippery slope, and I'm just like, well, there's a slippery slope with everything. That's what whatever. But yeah, that you couldn't really get more. So the other
violence of holding her down as well.
No, honestly, that made me really uncomfortable. And then the other case, which is the one that you mentioned, Naomi, was a doctor who said that she had to resign because there was a patient, he'd got dementia, and he'd initially said he wanted euthanasia, and he wanted, and then apparently his wife, the doctor felt like his wife was bullying him a bit. She'd pressuring him, said, you're pressuring him a bit. She'd made comments of, oh, he wants it, oh, he doesn't. If only he just was less of a coward, which is just disgusting. So she said that she thought she'd got to a point where she'd agreed with the family it wasn't going to happen. And then she'd gone on annual leave, and when she came back, her colleague had euthanized him because her colleague had got a more pro-euthanasia stance. Now, we don't know the ins and outs of that case, but that made me incredibly uncomfortable as well, because she then said, I can't stay in this job when I can't keep my patients safe.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I can't believe the colleague was allowed to do that. Can you imagine coming back to that?
Can you imagine? Update on that other case. He was actually acquitted in the end. That doctor.
Was he?
Is it because they had proof? That she wanted that.
Applause broke out in the courtroom after the court heard that the doctor had been right to abide by the woman's stated wishes, that there was no legal duty to verify the current death wish in such a case.
Jesus. Whew. Well, that is a slippery slope right there, isn't it?
That's very interesting.
Because when there was current death wish, I mean, I get it, because they were saying in that Ariella case that right before they say, "Are you sure?" And if there's any inkling of doubt, then they adjourn. But I suppose
maybe it's because the family were involved as well.
She'd stated herself that she wanted to be able to decide when to die while still in my senses and when I think the time is right. But how do they know that she thought the time was right? Because she was only half saying that.
God, it's really fucking tricky, isn't it?
Yeah.
Who knows? I wonder if I wonder, just, I mean, obviously I know this is totally hypothetical, but imagine if they went back to that woman in her senses. You know, if they could go back and ask her, did we do the right thing? I wonder what she'd say.
Oh, sorry, the doctor was a woman, I assume.
Yeah, it was. I thought it was a woman.
Whoops, yeah.
I imagine that she would say yes, because she said when she had full capacity that this is what I want. I imagine she'd say yes.
It's tricky though, isn't it? Because I mean, yeah, but then
I don't understand why they didn't have to prove it.
If that is what she wanted, then just because we're squeamish and uncomfortable about it, but it's so difficult, isn't it? There's no way
she
of going
didn't
back
know.
and establishing.
Yeah, plus, like, it's what she wanted, but she didn't know. But if she had known that she was going to go out like that, would she still say?
Yeah, because like, isn't the whole point to die with dignity? Like, that's dignity, not with dignity, is
not being pinned down and fought.
But the other option would be what? That she'd be confused, not know who she is, shitting herself in a bed. I mean, I don't know. I'm not saying that case is right. I absolutely don't think it is. It makes me really uncomfortable.
I found that other one really interesting. The one that was like that son who said like his mum had terminal cancer, but because she was depressed and wanted to die, she overstated her physical illness to doctors. And the son was saying that she was able to act really well and basically make it look like she was in so much pain than she really was, when really the pain was only in her mind and not in her body. And that worked, and he
but she did have lung cancer though.
Yeah, but like he thinks that she could have had a few more years. And
and he buried her with that letter.
Because he was really angry about it. But I listened to that one as well. So the son is really angry that his mother was euthanized, and I think the point they were making in that was that he didn't know she was doing it.
He didn't even know.
And he felt he had a right to know. But I don't agree that he did. He had a right to ask her, and she had a right to privacy. And if he didn't like it, then so be it. Plenty of families do things that other people in their families don't like.
Well, they were saying that a lot of people who get euthanized will overstate the pain that they're in to get to receive the euthanasia as well. I didn't. The fact that he buried her with that letter about how resentful he was and cross he was, I thought was too much. Or was
like, it's not about, like, it's her choice. If she wanted to do something that you weren't happy with, she had a choice
to be buried with.
She could have told him if she'd wanted to. She obviously made probably because she knew he would react like that. I've written you a letter.
I doubt it was a letter that was like combative in nature. It was probably just more like, I really regret that I couldn't spend a few more years with you kind of thing.
It did.
Like, I regret not realizing. It was probably more guilt than anger, probably, in that letter, I would assume.
But that's her autonomy. She has that right. She had that right to make that decision, and because that is one of the things they were saying. Like they wanted it to be, or at some point in the initial considerations of the law, there was a consideration about family members being involved and being told, and then that was scrapped because of the potential for you know,
them to resist.
Potential for them trying to influence it and get involved, and ultimately, it's, you know, if a person wants to throw themselves off a bridge, they can. So they don't need to liaise with other family members. That's autonomy. I think that's personal autonomy. I don't think you should have to involve anybody else.
So, like, at what point is a person's autonomy overridden by the state? So, like, you know, with this case we discussed before with like Archie and Charlie, at the end of the day, those parents, their autonomy was taken away from them because the court decided, well, actually, we know best, you don't know best. At what point is that line? At what point is that line drawn?
Autonomy, because autonomy is over yourself, isn't it?
Yes, but if it's a baby,
child's autonomy, and a child doesn't have legal capacity.
Yeah, so in that sense, then that's when it's about the parent has autonomy then, because, like you say, the child doesn't have the capacity to decide on these things. So at what point is it? Does the state say, well, actually, no, this isn't about what you want. Your autonomy doesn't actually matter at this point because we think that we know what's best.
They need to clear beds. Or they think that a parent is causing... I mean, I suppose there's two arguments, isn't there, with the Archie case. One, they needed the beds. You can't just keep dead people on ventilators for months and months and months at great expense. Yeah. But also, those medical professionals have an oath to do no harm, and they thought that by keeping him on a ventilator, they were doing harm. So they felt they had a legal duty to apply to the court and for the court to make a decision.
There are, like, from what I understand, I think there are like 4 pillars that medical professionals are supposed to abide by. So I just find that quite interesting that the court can step in and just override that.
Yeah.
When they think it's best.
Well, the court can step in and take children off parents when they think it's best. But
when it's an obviously harmful situation, yeah, I guess that's what it is, isn't it? When it's like seems obviously harmful,
very obviously,
that's when they say, well,
soz,
that's what you want, but
parents,
you're not having it.
I mean, rarely do the parents agree with it. But what's the difference between them physically harming him in life and just letting him lying in a bed shitting himself while his brain rots?
Taking up like all of the doctor's time and all of the nurse's time, and you're like harming other patients at that point.
And having a new I don't know. I mean, in care proceedings where they look at whether or not they need to remove children, that it's a very, very steep threshold to meet. So you can't just be like, these parents are a bit shit, this is going wrong. You have to meet a very high threshold, and the law is very, very clear that it's not the state's job to step in to correct all shit parenting. I mean, that isn't the formal terminology, but it isn't the state's job to step in and stop all forms of inadequate parenting. It has to be a very, very high threshold, otherwise you're at risk of social engineering.
Sorry, just the 4 pillars here. 4 pillars of medical ethics are autonomy, respect for the patient's right to self-determination, beneficence, the duty to do good, non-maleficence is the duty to not do bad, and then justice is to treat all people equally and equitably. Okay. There we go. Would you know, before when you were saying you would have a kid to treat Violet, if she was ill, would you say that Violet needed a kidney? Would you have a kid and then like remove an organ?
If Violet was going to die, I'd do anything. She might irritate the fuck out of me because I can never just look at my flowers in peace. Yeah. But if she was going to die and there was any way around it, I would do anything.
But then what about the potential that kid could die if the surgery went wrong?
That's just potential versus you don't. I mean, most people.
But you would risk the other kid dying then.
Well, it's not a big risk, is it, to have a kidney? You've got 2.
You're still risking the death of a child to save another child.
Right. Yeah.
Really? God, I find that really interesting.
Mm.
So if you do have another kid now, do you think that Violet ultimately will always be your favourite?
No, it's not about favourites.
Really? Okay.
But it's not one dying versus the other dying, is it? Because if you've got a child who is going to die if you don't intervene, and you've got another child where there's a risk of them having an operation and whatever,
a risk of them dying.
That's not the same risk. One risk is here, one risk is, death.
It's not the same. It's not the same amount of risk, but it's still like, I'm surprised that you would take that risk there. Not in a judgmental way, I'm just surprised.
But I don't think it is that big a risk to have a kidney transplant, to give somebody a kidney.
If you have one kidney, then for the rest of your life you're on dialysis.
Are you?
And you are actually, you're on, like, you're poorly.
Are you?
I'm pretty sure.
I don't think so.
But it's not like a low risk thing to remove an organ, which I think is why I'm surprised. It's not like, oh yeah, fuck it, yeah. Take a kidney, okay.
Plus, if something fucks up with like your one left one, like over later in life, then you're fucked.
All right. So, according to National Kidney Foundation, dialysis should be started only if your kidneys have lost 85 to 90% of their function. Since you usually have nearly normal kidney function when you have one, you won't need dialysis unless it fails. But I mean, we're getting into minutiae here.
Yeah.
If there was a risk of harm to the other child to save one, then I would save one.
Really? Yeah. Okay. So if you had another child then after Violet, and that kid got really ill, and Violet could save that kid, you would risk taking something from her, like a kidney, to save the other one.
It's funny because now you've said it, I'm like, that's hard. Now I actually have to imagine her because she's a real person.
Yeah.
And it's difficult as well because
and what if she doesn't want to do it?
Wow. I don't know. I'll have to have that conversation with her. But I still think on balance, probably to save the child's life. If I loved that other child as much as I love Violet, which I probably would. Depends how many times that child said to me, "Mummy, look what I can do. Look at this. Mummy, look at this. I can do this." It's not fucking impressive.
My mum's been looking up our family tree, and she sent a WhatsApp today, and she sent a picture of like her great grandfather to me on WhatsApp. And she was like, "Oh, he looks a bit like George Clooney, doesn't he?" I was like, "Mum, are you
such a shaggy granddad?
Are you saying that your own great grandfather,
my granddaddy hot,
is hot?"
To be fair, my granddad was handsome in his younger years. I've got pictures of him, and I was like, "Oh, they make a very my granddad and my grandma make a very handsome couple." But I saw him when he was old, and he was not handsome anymore.
But he was actually a civil engineer, and he left like what would be the equivalent of £4 million to his children. So
wow.
where the fuck is my money?
Are we all a bit fucking dead today?
We should have all had a wank just before, like we said we were going to last time.
I know. For God's sake, I was tempted to wank today, and
we'll
I
just come on next time all glowy because we've all had a wank. But can you imagine me trying to do it with them assholes in the background? Mummy,
what are you doing?
Mummy. Oh.
Has she ever knocked on your door when you've been trying to have a wank?
No.
Good.
But she has, like, I can remember once when I can't remember, she was quite a lot younger, and I'd trying to like have, intercourse, or like trying to have a sex life. And I can remember being like almost there when she woke up in the night crying and being like, "No." Because like, what can you do? I just have to like hop off and go and sort her, and you're like, fuck's sake.
That's the thing, you've got to be so selfless. I really enjoy being selfish.
And it does not come naturally to me at all.
I guess something just kicks in, doesn't it, when you have a kid? It's like, okay, I have this thing that depends on me. It's not about me anymore. I mean, if you're a good parent.
That kicks, because when she was born and I was in hospital, I can remember like, you're not like hardly any sleep, but the doctor wanted to do a check on her, and he was like, "Should I just take her and go do it, or do you want to come?" And I was like, "I'm coming." Just there's something within you that's like, I'm going to protect this little fucker. Even though it's just a doctor doing a check, like, he's not going to do anything, was he? But I was like, I'm coming. And I will watch you, doctor, with my tiny, precious little baby, and make sure that you don't do anything.
See, I feel like that's the thing that makes me think, oh, maybe I would have children, because I probably will, but I like the idea of having like feeling this love that is like incomparable, and I know, just like when I think about it, just how much I'd love my child, but you don't actually fully know until you have it. And I like the idea of, like, I guess, the intensity of that and the bond.
Well, I kind of feel like it would be the way that I feel about my cats now, but maybe more intense. Although I don't know if that could be any more intense, the love I have for my cats. So
yeah, but
it's hard to imagine.
Oh, it's totally different. I can remember when we took her on holiday to Spain. We went down to the pool. I was going around the pool, and she just shat all in a swimming costume. She just had this, and honestly, it was like a ball. It was like a tennis ball in a swimming costume. She got out and she was like, I don't know why I do this. I don't know why you fucking do it either, you pain in the ass. She was like doing the walk of shame, like around the pool with this tennis ball sized poo. But she looks back on that memory very fondly, because I've seen 2 of her exercise books at school. When she's been asked to talk about something that happened, she talks about
shitting herself.
She talks about when she shat herself in the pool. Yeah,
that's so funny.
Probably because I talk about it fondly, because it is very funny. It
is funny.
Yeah. Oh, I was laughing. I was laughing, Naomi, weren't we, the other day, because me and Georgia were. Because the other day, we were just driving. She'd obviously listened to the thing about you, and she was like, Naomi really shouldn't be eating crisps in a library.
That's so funny.
Can I tell you a funny story before we go? Have I told you the Big Ben story before?
Big Ben, the tower, or Big Ben like someone's peeing?
Well, both.
Ooh.
Someone called Ben and Big Ben the tower. Right. I think this is a really good filter for whether somebody's going to have a similar humour to me or not. And let's see what you guys think of this. So, my stepdad does a job where he works in an office full of men. And the job they do, they often have apprentices. And the latest one was a young guy, really nice guy called Ben. Yeah? Now, my stepdad also has a brother who's quite eccentric, shall we say. He's kind of like the local. He often is in town day drinking, getting absolutely shit-faced. Yeah, so his brother is called the Moon, because he's got a nickname of the Moon, because he only comes out at night.
We met him.
You met the Moon. Yeah, I remember this now. Yeah, because he was dancing with you at a working men's club.
Yeah.
And he loved that you were wearing Doc Martens, and he kept being like, "You're going to work after. You're going to work a shift in your Doc Martens."
People often have something to say about my Doc Martens. Like, it was a very common shoe.
Yeah. Well, not for a man in a working men's club in Grantham. But anyway. Yeah, so there's a lot about him that's very, like, small town, that whatever. But he really is quite funny in a weird way, especially when he's drunk. Some of the shit he comes out with can be really quite funny. And he's got a bit better now. But anyway, he was. What happened was, Ben told me this, because I knew him. We were similar age, but this was about, I don't know, 10 years ago, 10 years ago, something like that. Anyway, Moon had been out drinking, and he recognised Ben. Ben, who was having a nice meal with his family in some sort of pub that had like a nice seating area where you go and eat. Moon went over and went, I think he drunkenly talked at them for about 20 minutes while they were trying to eat the meal. Then he looked at Ben and went, "Who are you?" To which Ben said, "I'm Ben." And Moon, with Ben there and his parents there, just looked at him and went, "Big Ben." Big Ben struck 10. Little Ben shit himself. Just walked off. It's one of my favourite stories ever. Can you imagine his parents sat there like...
Okay, my loves. Well, it was nice chatting to you, even though it was about a dark subject.
Right, we need to say bye and do a proper outro.
Bye, proper outro.